Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Spinner Reviews. Today I'm going to be talking about the new EP from LA experimental hip-hop group Clipping. It's called Wriggle. These guys were kind of building buzz since around 2013 or so, but what really caught my attention was the last project they put out, which was kind of self-titled, but it had the eyes taken out, and because they don't use first person in their lyrics, I think it's clever. Definitely one of my favorite hip-hop releases of that year. And if I had to describe their sound in a nutshell, if you like some of the ideas in, say, some of Death Grip's most acclaimed projects, and like the kind of noisier sound going on, but just wish it was a lot more focused, straightforward, coherent, and to the point, and the rapping was, intelligible, then I would strongly recommend Clipping, as using the term gateway would be kind of, in a way, demeaning, I think, because they're definitely not the most accessible act around, but I think that they do a really good job of hooking in more, I suppose, traditional hip-hop fans than, say, Death Grips or someone in that super experimental lane in the genre. Another thing that really got me about that album is sort of the lyrics and the content of it, and the fact that the rapper, lyricist, and just general face of the group, Daveed Diggs, was typically similar stuff as you'd hear in a lot of gangster rap type stuff, but I think that he did it in a slightly more clever twist, making it a little more subversive, kind of poking fun at it while at the same time not totally coming off above it, just painting this really stark, grim reality while still having kind of a dark sense of humor about it. Anyway, in the nearly 2 years since that album came out on Sub Pop, which is a really cool decision by Sub Pop, by the way, props to them, the guys in Clipping have kind of been doing their own things, like Daveed decided to join this little play you've probably never heard of in some bit part. And just this past week, he decided to pull the ultimate badass move by literally the day after winning his Tony for this play, deciding to release his experimental hip-hop group's new EP on Bandcamp for people that were curious about that and decided to Google him to check out for themselves. God, I would love to watch those reaction videos. So getting to this new EP here, Wriggle, it's 6 tracks, about 20 minutes, and while I'm hesitant to say that it really steps things up from the last album, I think it kind of keeps things about the same level of quality. I think a big part of it is that Daveed still has that kind of really interesting perspective on how he depicts the stuff going on. A lot of it's very ghetto-related scenarios and just describing the environment. He doesn't glorify it, and that's one thing. A lot of the time something to commend. Some people can pull it off, but most people can't, let's just be honest. But at the same time, it's not begging for pity, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that, like I said earlier, he never uses the first person when he's writing, at least in Clipping. In a way, it adds a lot to the immersion of everything, because it never devolves into, oh, I'm going through this bad thing, feel bad for me. It's just this very stark, honest, real, and almost chillingly neutral way of looking at things that just makes more room to make things more vivid and descriptive. Pretty much all of that applies to the intro for this thing, which, like the intros from their previous projects, are basically Daveed rapping really fast with this high-pitched squeal of a noise behind him for about a minute, and then he says the band's signature phrase, "It's Clipping, bitch," only this time the bitch is replaced by this kind of staticky noise. I'm sure that means something symbolism-wise, but I haven't figured it out yet. Then we have the first more full-length song here, Shooter, which has this really impending doom kind of vibe to it, which Clipping on the production side really does well, and Daveed too on a song like Story 2 from the last album, and it has this synth tone that kind of hops along. You hip-hop fans are gonna kill me for making this comparison, but hear me out. It reminds me of what would happen if the people that produced Iggy Azalea's Fancy knew what to do with that beat. Like, in the right hands, when you hear that do 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 kind of melody with that sound and the slight echo in the background and the kind of light percussion, and just what Daveed's talking about with this guy going around mugging people, holding up liquor stores, and even shooting a few other people along the way. It paints this picture that at times is kind of chilling, but at the same time the more funny lines offset it a little, but at the same time it weirdly makes it even more emotionally kind of stirring in its own weird, twisted way. Now, the one thing I can see turning some people off is that the verses for almost every line use this thing that was popular in around 2011 or 2012 that was generally called hashtag rap. And I got a grocery bag. And there are a couple, like, less clever lines, but in this case, I think that he actually kind of does some of the best hashtag rap you're gonna hear. Like, one couplet that really stood out to me was, "Clerk shitting in his drawers, Skid Row. Thought shit was just a hood game, skip rope." And another line that stood out to me, "Found a spot where the pigs can't get to him, vegan." The next song, Back Up, really amps up that dirtier vibe with the loud cacophonous percussion and like the noisier beeps going on in the background. And it kind of shows what I really think is cool about Clipping's production style. On most of their songs, you definitely hear more noise than actual, melody, but just the way that everything's put together, it's still some of the most like infectious hip-hop you're gonna hear, at least on the more experimental side of things. Not to mention, David has this really magnetic way of flowing, as you can see on a song like this, where no matter how fast he goes, you can understand every single word he says. Like, he has some of the best enunciation in the game. But anyway, back to the song. On this, both David and the two other guest rappers, I can't quite remember their names, are basically talking about this girl that grew up in a bad area and really is desperate to make it big in Hollywood and just be famous. So she does all of these desperate things, including one part about her actually signing up to be a cam girl for foot fetishists. And at certain points, she takes really crazy drugs and, kills the guy she attracts, as you do. I kind of see it as like a spiritual successor to Body and Blood. And while maybe it's a little less cohesive than Body and Blood, not quite the instant smash, just awesome clipping song that Body and Blood was, it's still one of the better moments on here. I still really enjoy this track for what it has to offer. The title track, Wriggle, is probably my favorite song here. It's definitely Clipping at their most directly Death Grips resembling, with the weird mishmash of the speeding drum machine with the vocal sample fragments throughout the song going on in the background, with the wriggle like an eel kind of going into the admittedly super infectious chorus, which is weird because these are like some of the most, I guess, creatively twisted lyrics on here. It sounds like it's about a guy who sexually harassed or assaulted a girl, and his punishment is that he's been taken away and been held up, and in addition to him being tortured, assumedly by the guy that's narrating this song, he's also being sexually stimulated by a girl kind of rubbing up on him, blue-balling him, for lack of a better term. It weirdly reminds me of that one scene in The Lobster. If you guys have seen that movie, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But yeah, this is one of those songs where I just found myself listening to it over and over and over again, and just trying to piece together every little detail of what they're talking about. The next song, Hot Fuck No Love, it's a very straightforward sex song. It doesn't really have much of a twist or a subversion to it. There are a few clever lines, especially from the other rapper on the song, Cakes to Kill, who I've heard good stuff about. But in general, it's just not really my kind of thing. I feel similarly about it that I did about, say, Love Again from the last Run Jewels album. And the EP ends with the song Our Time, which is probably the most ominous sounding song here. And what I'm gathering lyrically is that it's this very convoluted picture of these two people in a relationship that keep being dishonest to each other and sleeping around. It gets a little hard to follow with just everything that's happening that's making this relationship so toxic, but in a weird way I think that was meant to be intentional. And yeah, overall this is another high quality set of clipping tracks that definitely appeal to a lot of my hip-hop preferences, personally. I would be a little disappointed if the wait before the next full-length album was the same as it was between the last full-length album and this, but I still really enjoyed this EP, and I think I'm going to give it a very light 8. So if you guys have heard this EP, what do you think about it? Do you agree with what I had to say? Do you disagree? Have any feedback about what I'm doing here in general? Let me know in the comments down below. Share this around with anyone who might be interested. Follow me on Twitter in the description for updates, and hopefully I'll see you in the next episode of Spinner Reviews. It's Berman, bitch.